So you talked about the reliability of miracles. Could you explain that a little bit? Like, because I have written down here as my note, being that John was written in the lifetime of Jesus, which there's no evidence to suggest that actually. He was right, or the gospel was written in the 2nd century, most likely. So, I mean, could you expand a little bit on like why the miracles are reliable, especially considering the fact that the miracles that Jesus did are copied from the Old Testament?
Sure. Yeah. And this is in my opening presentation that I gave an example of a hostile source or documentation of Jesus doing magic from the Talmud. And that is, to me, this is what all the other scholars come to the same conclusion as me. That is valid evidence of a real miracle worker. That's one apparent example. But there's also Romans talking about magic too, with performing magic.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you're the one bringing up magic here. I'm not saying that miracles are
I'm
magic.
just saying that's what the Talmud says. I'm just quoting what it actually says.
Okay. Well, I of course, I don't remember verbatim what your quote said, but I don't remember it talking about Jesus being the one that was doing the healing. I remember something about, was it like a priest or something that got bit by a snake, and then he went running for somebody to heal him, and he died before the healing could happen?
Yes, his name is Jacob.
Okay. So I mean, I don't understand how you translate that particular quote to being about Jesus when it's not even about Jesus.
Well, no, that was a side. That was just a side example to help demonstrate that the Talmud did document these type of things into their records. So I could read this again for you. I'll just real quick. So, quote, not only do hostile accounts fail to deny Jesus' supernatural abilities, they also seem to support the ability of his followers to heal in his name. In the Talmud, there's a story about a rabbi who was bitten by a venomous snake and calls on a Christian named Jacob to heal him. Unfortunately, before Jacob can get there, the rabbi dies. And this is from Morton Smith, a scholar. So that's what I was trying to bring across to you with that argument.
Okay, well, I still don't see that as being evidence of the reliability of miracles, primarily because I don't see it. I mean, it's just simply not evidence that a miracle was done. I mean, what evidence do you have that any of the miracles of Jesus were actually done?
Well, it depends what your standard criteria is. What is your criteria? Does it have to be an... So I gave you a non-biblical source. I guess that's not good enough, but I can give you a biblical source in John that does the same thing. Is that going to be good enough?
So let me clear something up real quick. It's not that it was, not good enough or anything like that. It's just simply that it wasn't evidence. Like that literally was not evidence of the reliability of miracles. That was just an anecdotal story of some guy who got bit by a snake and didn't get to a healer fast enough.
No, I'm talking about the Talmud of Jesus. They say
that particular story right there doesn't actually prove whether or not miracles happen. So what I'm asking for is evidence, any kind of evidence, like, and not from the Gospels, because the Gospels are the claims that Jesus did these things. So they would have to be outside sources from the Gospels or something like that. Just even a mild reference to it that Jesus did these specific miracles.
Well, I mean, see that's standard. Like I say, you're importing in your modern lenses and your standards and criteria and imposing it into an ancient text. And all the ancient texts back then, they didn't have other external witnesses and other accounts to confirm that these things happen. And I laid all this out in my opening, and this is what we call a presentism fallacy. That is a fallacious error to do that. Nope. And I pointed that out.
I know that you pointed that out, but also that's not my criterion for evidence. And so, I mean, I'm just simply not falling into that fallacy. For instance, like I know you in one of your quotes you referenced Alexander the Great. The best historian that wrote the best biography about Alexander the Great was Arrian, and he was writing 500 years after Alexander the Great lived, and that's a perfectly good source, but it's because he was using firsthand accounts from two of Alexander the Great's generals. He names the sources in his biography. He tells us where he got them from. He also names off other people that had firsthand accounts of Alexander the Great. So it doesn't really matter so much the time frame from when something was written. It depends on what their primary sources are and whether or not they're independent of the Gospels.
Okay,
that's
so I like to
my only
respond to
criteria,
that.
which is not anything that would be in that presentism fallacy that you mentioned. So if you could just give me evidence that is independent of the Gospels that would corroborate Jesus doing miracles, then
I'm going to respond to that. So I think that's shifting the goalposts, and it does fall in the presentism fallacy because you're importing in your modern ideas and assumptions and criterion into an ancient time period, which that is I'm unfair. That's unfair to them. Oh, hold on. Let me finish. I'm gonna. You know who Tim O'Neill is? He's an atheist historian. He responds to this.
He's not a historian.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's what he is. He's actually labeled that if you look him up on several sites. So I'm just saying. He's chronicled that. So
he's not. He doesn't hold. Does he hold a history degree?
Yeah, he does. So, okay, here's what he says, and he says, quote, "For example, few people in the ancient world were as prominent, influential, significant, famous as Carthaginian General Hannibal. He came close to crushing the Roman Republic, was one of the greatest generals of all time, and was famed throughout the ancient world for centuries after his death down to today. Yet, how many contemporary mentions of Hannibal do we have? Zero. We have none. So if someone as famous and significant as Hannibal has no surviving contemporary references to him in our sources, does it really make sense to base an argument about the existence or non-existence of a Galilean peasant preacher and the lack of contemporary references to him? Clearly, it does not. So I'd like for you to respond to Hannibal. That'd be great.
Okay, so first off, with Tim O'Neill, just to be specific, I did look up his credentials on his site historyforatheists.com. He's got a bachelor's degree with honors in English and history and a research master's degree from the University of Tasmania with a specialization in historicist analysis of medieval literature. So, I mean, this will be an example of a appeal to false authority because he doesn't actually have the credentials for talking about the first century, whereas authors that I use actually do have those particular credentials.
But I'm not really even appealing to his credentials. I'm appealing to what he said. Could you address what he actually said, the meat and potatoes of what he said?
Well, now you were talking about Hadrian?
I'm talking about Hannibal.
Or sorry, not Hadrian, Hannibal. I'm sorry, I was busy looking up that thing. Could you repeat what he said about Hannibal?
Right. So we have zero contemporary or external references to him or accounts. So I'll put it this way: non-Hannibal accounts of Hannibal. Zero. And we also have no contemporary accounts of Hannibal either.
Okay, hold on. I'm pulling out I didn't come prepared to talk about other historical figures out there. I came prepared to talk about Jesus.
But you see how that's relevant though, because you're not being fair to your how you're applying it to both sides. So if you're going to say Hannibal is justified.
Okay, can I read from my actual section on Hannibal that's in that I prepared for my app?
Sure. Yeah.
So, okay. So the flow of precious metals and excavated camps materials corroborate Hannibal's existence. He has coins and a bust that are most likely him. Epitaphs of soldiers from both sides of the war attest to his existence. Polybus wrote extensively about Hannibal. He had eyewitness accounts of Hannibal, first-hand accounts of people that knew Hannibal, and bronze inscriptions. Livy is also a good source for Hannibal's existence, even though he wrote 100 years after Polybus. Livy had access to state documents that reference Hannibal. Like Livy, Cornelius Nepos, Diodorus, Corlius Antipater, Silenius Calatinius, I'm not good at pronouncing these names, Valerius Antius, and Claudius Quadra something, all wrote about Hannibal within 100 years of their lives. Cato the Elder, Roman historian Fabius Pictor, Solius of Lacedaemon, and Silenus of Caulicete wrote about Hannibal. Lucius Sinus Almietus wrote a firsthand account of Hannibal while he was a Roman war prisoner. We have a lot of evidence for Hannibal, and it doesn't have to be like a firsthand account, even though we have evidence where secondary accounts that include firsthand accounts of Hannibal. So that is my quality of evidence right there. It's either firsthand accounts of something happening, or it could be secondhand accounts that include references to firsthand accounts. Also physical things, although I'm not expecting physical things to be in existence for Jesus. Since we're talking about evidence and whether or not, like, my criteria fits this presentism thing, my criteria for the evidence for what we're talking about matches everything else for historical studies. I'm just going by general historical study methods of how we know something happened in history.
So you had a couple physical things. What we do have, we have coins of Caesar, and we even have a pilot stone. So, I mean, they're not directly pointing, they're not saying, oh, look, this is Jesus, but they confirm that there was people or characters or figures of that time that show that they physically existed. So why couldn't I use that in place of Jesus then?
Well, we have fictional narratives now that include real people. I believe, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I believe he appeared either in Superman or I think it was in Superman. He appeared in Superman. Does that make Superman real?
Well, I can see the same thing about Hannibal. Does that, because there's a coin, does that make the evidence valid then? Could it just be made up and be some type of supernatural myth or something back then? So anyone can play that game.
That are actual
anyone
money
can dismiss anything.
That has Superman on it, though.
No, you said there were some coins and then some first-hand accounts 100 years, which, we do have that anyway of Jesus
we do not
Christ.
have any first-hand accounts of Jesus, and we definitely don't have coins of Jesus, but I'm not expecting coins. But no, the emperors and leaders had coins minted in their names all the time. That's why we would find coins with Hannibal's likeness on them. That's just one facet. Like, that's one piece of evidence that supports his existence. There's many other things, including first-hand accounts as recorded by later historians.
Okay, so we have James' tomb. Are you familiar with that? That actually says James, the brother of Jesus. Oh, was that not good enough, though?
Ossuary. You're talking about the ossuary, right?
Right, James, brother of Jesus. It's been authenticated.
The thing that was actually proven to be a forgery? Yeah, I know about that.
There's nowhere has ever been. If you could actually give citation of that, I would love to see that. We actually have archaeologists.
I'll have to pull it up later because, like I said, I came to debate.
It's just convenient for you just to deny anything you want. It's denialism.
But it's fairly easy to find on the internet how the James ossuary is not authentic, and it's actually been proven.
I can give you a source right now that shows it is, because I've researched it myself. So I would say no.
I research it too. Faulty. I just don't find the first thing that confirms my bias.
Oh, so yeah, isn't it convenient for you to dismiss something because it doesn't comport to you? But when I bring up something, all of a sudden it doesn't comport to your criteria of evidence. See,
I have reasons
this is exactly what I had in my opening and my
to
presentation, that because of your philosophical bias, you will never accept evidence. And I gave citations from
no,
people,
I don't have a philosophical
authorities.
bias against Jesus. And this is, in fact, one of the things he brought up, which was a quote by Bart Ehrman right at the very end that says that myths have an agenda. I have no agenda. I really don't care whether or not Jesus existed in history. Like, Jesus could have existed in history. In fact, there were multiple Jesuses that existed in history. And I know for a fact that there were people named Jesus that the later gospel authors used to model their Jesus off of. So, I mean, I just don't think that Jesus, as depicted in the Bible, which is specifically what this debate is about, does not exist, because there's simply no evidence to suggest the things that are recorded in the Gospels and in Acts are real. Like, there's just simply no evidence. You don't have anything outside of the gospel.
I've given you evidences over evidences. You just don't accept them because of your biases.